ladies and gentlemen, and welcome everybody to a new edition of Africa Today. Egypt is welcoming, of course, the deal of ceasefire finally in Lebanon and implementing by this the UN resolution 1701 concerning the Lebanese territories and control, and that which actually issues that the Lebanese army takes control on the southern or the south of Lebanon, and the employment of the Lebanese army in southern Lebanon and its control over all the Lebanese territories. Of course, as a first response, our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Medhat, he highlighted the approaching the ceasefire in Lebanon, ending by this, of course, and urging for an end to the Israeli aggression and the Israeli escalation on Gaza Strip. The Egyptian Ministry also of Foreign Affairs said in a statement that the deal would contribute to de-escalation to the region by fully implementation of the UN Security Council Resolution 1701, including the employment of the Lebanese army in southern Lebanon and its control, as we mentioned, on the Lebanese territories. So the ministry also reiterated that the necessity of respecting the Lebanon sovereignty without interference in its internal affairs. Well, ladies and gentlemen, to shed more light on this, we are delighted to have over the phone our dear guest, Ambassador Medhat Meligy, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Your Ambassador, welcome to our edition of Africa Today, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon.
And pretty good news, actually, finally reaching a ceasefire and a peace agreement on Lebanon, actually, which maybe will get us to approach a ceasefire deal on Gaza Strip. So how we finally find the ceasefire agreement first on Lebanon?
Well, actually, I'm completely thrilled, and I understand the enthusiasm of the Egyptian foreign minister to reach finally such an agreement. Egypt have tried several times, and we have spoken in many areas. We had several meetings with our Lebanese brothers, and of course we had some connection with the Israeli through the American in order to reach a ceasefire that was imminent and was very important. But let's not forget that, of course, the conditions of this agreement on the Lebanese front, they were more positive and flexible than on the Gaza Strip, and this is due to the fact that Hezbollah entrusted the task of negotiations to the Lebanese government, and also the fact that Lebanon is a large and sovereign country with excellent conditions and relations with all the countries in the world. As for Gaza, as we all know, the negotiations have always failed until this moment, and this was due maybe to the fact that Hamas movement was leading the negotiations itself and refused to delegate this task to the Palestinian Liberation Organization or even the Palestinian Authority led by Mr. Mahmoud Abbas. Yeah. But I mean, so the conditions were more favorable for Lebanon to reach a ceasefire than it is for Gaza, and I expect, since there were no liberation of the hostages as Israel wanted, that the bombardment on Gaza will resume, and even with a bigger intensity after that.
Benjamin Netanyahu, we assured that they will never give up releasing the hostages on Gaza Strip, and that's why. Is it a sign that they will not reach, in the time being, a sort of agreement of a ceasefire on Gaza Strip, your point of view?
Well, let's remember the conditions that Israel has put, and actually we've seen that Israel is actually reaching whatever it says that it wants. And Israel has said from the beginning, it's not just about the release of hostages, but the surrender and the total defeat of Hamas, which is totally non-acceptable by the Palestinians and by those who are trying to help the Palestinians. And unfortunately, since Israel is actually permitted to continue doing whatever it wants to do, so I don't think that there will be any ceasefire soon on Gaza before the full liberation of the rest of the refugees or whoever is going to be left of them after the bombardment, and to a certain level, the destruction of the infrastructure of Hamas. Let's not forget that in order to reach a ceasefire with the Lebanese, there were conditions imposed by Israel, which is that the Lebanese forces and Lebanese army have to be the one on the borders of southern border of Lebanon with Israel, and the retreat of Hezbollah toward the northern of the Litani River. Yeah. And I think this is just to secure that there will not be any more aggression from Hezbollah. But let's also hope that the conditions that were mentioned yesterday when we were talking about reaching an agreement, which is that the United States will help to reach an agreement between the Lebanese and the Israelis indirectly to reach a final border on the between the two sides. And this is very important since Israel, from the very beginning, from its creation in 1948 until today, they never want to recognize their borders, since they believe that any land that they can annex is part of the state of Israel. So if they will draw a line about their frontiers and their borders with Lebanon, that would at least finish with the northern borders of Israel and remain the rest of the borders. Not to forget, of course, that the borders on their western side, which is Egypt, is already finalized since the Camp David Accord, and finally with Taba returning to its motherland, Egypt. So I believe that this is a very important step in order to calm the situation indefinitely after the creation of borders recognized by the two states first and the United Nations, and accordingly the international community on the other hand.
Yep. Your Excellency, that was the ceasefire agreement, and have been reached upon a mediation of France, the French President the French President Emmanuel Macron, and the American President Biden. Do you believe, I mean, I'm just wondering here, or just would like to ask you here concerning the leverage that the U.S. could really practice on the Israeli side. Can the U.S. use the same leverage on Israel to approach a ceasefire in Gaza? And why it's so difficult in here?
Well, they could if they want. But unfortunately, what we've seen so far since the beginning of this war, the 7th of October last year, that the United States doesn't want actually to put any pressure on Israel. It only recognizes what Israel wants to achieve, but they don't push it to do anything. And of course, everybody knows that if Israel did not believe in reaching a ceasefire with the Lebanese and sure that it has achieved its goals by the killing of Nasrallah and then Mr. Hashim Safieddin, his successor, and weaken the infrastructure of Hezbollah, they wouldn't have accepted a ceasefire. So actually, although the efforts of all countries concerned, including Egypt, this agreement would not have reached and seen the day if Israel didn't want to reach an agreement. And Israel only accepted because it feels that it has achieved a major part of its goals in Israel. Although the loss that they have taken since the beginning of this war with Lebanon. I mean, let's not forget that there were many casualties on the Israeli side as well. But as a general result, Israel believes that it has achieved its goals. So I think that the United States, especially at this moment, when Mr. Biden is about to leave the office and Mr. Trump did not actually take the power yet, I don't think that the United States is capable of really forcing Israel to accept any kind of ceasefire it doesn't want to accept. Let's not forget that if we add to this the nominations that we've seen about the new Trump administration, it does not look very bright on the Palestinian side. many of those chosen by Mr. Trump do not even recognize the presence of Palestinian people or a possible Palestinian state. And they have said it clearly that the whole land of Judea and Samaria, as they call them, and not the West Bank, is part of Israel. And these are not actually declarations that can help to reach any agreement between the Israelis and the Palestinians. On the contrary, it encourages the Israelis to annex more land and to continue its violation to the international law, although now its prime minister have been summoned by the International Criminal Court and his ex-minister of defense. But nevertheless, we have seen all Western countries, most of them, to be honest, are trying to find excuse for to not apply this warrant that has been issued concerning Mr. Netanyahu and Mr. Gallant. And this shows that although the situation that has changed in the streets and in the public opinion regarding the Palestinian issue, but within administration, the situation is still the same and it hasn't changed until now, so far at least.
Yep. Your Excellency, Ambassador Medhat Meligy, former Assistant Foreign Minister, many thanks for being with us and thank you for your time. Well, the G7 high-level foreign ministers meeting, it was this year, a few days ago in Italy, in the Italian city of Fiuggi. And our Foreign Minister, Dr. Medhat Abdelati, participated in such high-level meetings. And he highlighted the importance and the urgency to end the Israeli aggression on Gaza Strip and also to end the Israeli settlement policies in Gaza in general, not only in Gaza Strip, of course, because this threatens the whole region and threatens also the peace and stability in the Middle East. So let's watch this report and we'll come back to you.
Minister of Foreign Affairs Medhat Abdelati warned that the Israeli settlement expansion and calls to annex parts of the occupied Palestinian territories of the West Bank could result in grave implications for the future of peace in the Middle East. Abdelati's remarks came during his participation at the G7 foreign ministers meeting in the Italian city of Fiuggi, where they addressed developments in Gaza and Lebanon and ways to halt the escalation in the Middle East. According to a statement by the Foreign Minister, Abdelati underscored that such policies obstruct the chances of establishing an independent Palestinian state based on international references and the two-state solution. He cited Israel's ongoing aggression in Gaza and its blatant violations of international and humanitarian law over the past year, which have led to an unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe. Abdelati also condemned the Israeli policies aimed at displacing Palestinians, stressing the need for an immediate ceasefire and the uninterrupted delivery of humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip without Israeli obstruction. Additionally, he affirmed Egypt's complete rejection of any attempts to undermine the work of UN agencies, especially the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, affirming its vital role in alleviating the suffering of the Palestinian people. During the meeting, Abdelati also addressed the recent developments in Lebanon, stressing the necessity of an immediate ceasefire, the cessation of Israel's violations of Lebanese sovereignty, and implementing UN Security Council Resolution 1701. He also emphasized the need to empower Lebanese institutions, especially the Lebanese army, condemning Israel's targeting of the UN Interim Force in Lebanon, UNIFIL, describing it as a violation of international law and humanitarian law as well. According to the Foreign Ministry, Abdulati also participated in the Quartet meeting on Sudan, where he affirmed Egypt's keenness to achieve stability in Sudan, enabling the Sudanese people to achieve their aspirations. He also reiterated the necessity of preserving the Sudanese national institutions and respecting the country's sovereignty and territorial integrity, emphasizing the need for donor states to implement their pledges regarding the humanitarian response for Sudan, which faces a deficit of nearly 75% of its needs. He further emphasized the importance of focusing on two main goals, reaching a ceasefire and enhancing humanitarian aid access, expressing his concern over the deteriorating humanitarian situation in Sudan. The foreign minister referred to the internal displacement of more than 11 million Sudanese citizens, which has driven more than 3 million Sudanese refugees into neighboring countries, with Egypt receiving the largest share.
Welcome back, dear viewers. We're still ahead on TV International and in Africa Today. As in 2024, there are so many presidential elections that are taking place, really, in the whole world, as we witnessed the presidential election of the White House a few days ago on 1st of November or the 4th of November, and also the many other presidential elections. Also in Namibia, it could be a really historical moment and political station, very important political station actually, or moment, as the Vice President Nombaro Nandi Nantwawa could be, she is the leader of the Southwest Africa People's Organization, SWAPO. She could be the first African female president. Nandawa, she's focusing on the unemployment for the youth in Namibia. She's also focusing on her election program on many other essential files and essential issues, like the alongside reproductive rights and unemployment, and also addressing the nation's youth and their problems. Let's watch the next report and we'll come back to you.
Namibia's Vice President Nandi Ndaitwah could become the country's first female president if she wins the presidential election on Wednesday. At least 1.4 million people, or about half of the population, have registered to vote in the elections, with 15 political parties running for president and seats in the National Assembly. Results from special early polls held for Namibia's foreign missions and security services announced by the Electoral Commission of Namibia this month indicate Nandi Ndaitwah and her party, the Southwest African People's Organization, or SWAPO, are in the lead. SWAPO has governed the Southwest African country since its independence from South Africa's apartheid minority government in 1990. But in 2019, the party lost its two-thirds majority in the National Assembly for the first time since 1994. Its dismal electoral performance has been widely attributed to allegations of corruption and money laundering in the Namibian fishing industry. 2 cabinet ministers were arrested, and businessmen connected to the ministers were also convicted and imprisoned. Political analyst Henning Melber, a professor at the University of the Free State, believes SWAPO and Nandi Ndaitwah must take the 2019 election results as a warning, even though they appear favored to win the elections. Melber said the party needs to attract support from younger voters who don't feel a link to the party's history of liberation struggles, a challenge also shared by Africa's other former liberation movements, such as South Africa's African National Congress. Nandi.
Well, with this, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of our today's edition of Africa Today. Many thanks for watching, and goodbye.